Grumpig going to invest that Protect Shield before looking for that full psywave farm down, and path to victory from here should be quite straightforward. Lapras is energy dry, fire off the Dynamic Punch, forcing the final Protect Shield, just stay in, force the opponent to throw, and outpace with Galarian Weezing. So far so good. Where's that finger going, Jamie? Don't do it, we farm up. We're able to make the catch, potentially finding our own lose con. Thankfully, the opponent doesn't go for an undercharge. Grumpig re-enters the arena, fires off the Dynamic Punch, and asks yourself, are you not entertained? Welcome back to the channel. Less than 24 hours ago, the Go Battle League had its league turnover, as we always do every Tuesday. That means one thing for my channel, unless I receive a very early battle submission, which unfortunately I did not. It's time for me to get out of retirement and head back to battle. I've got an ongoing joke between myself, my Discord, and my faction too, that I'm somewhat retired. I battle so infrequently nowadays. If you're wondering when the last time I actually battled was, that was March 31st, and the only reason I did that was to get some battles recorded to send to Callum on Toes for the April Fool's video. Battle Frontier, I'll happily warm the bench as I've got no desire to play whatsoever. I think the main reason for my lack of motivation is having no in-game goals. I played for the Home Slice Homies at a decent level in Battle Frontier for quite a long time, and Go Battle League we've hit Legend numerous times, including 6 times on the bounce only using Shadow Pokemon. Unless we're going to see something past Legend rank, I really can't be bothered if I'm being brutally honest. There is one aspect of this game that I do still really enjoy, and that happens to be shoutcasting Pokemon Go PvP battles. Unfortunately today I'm going to have to shoutcast my own. I had absolutely no idea what to run whatsoever. My biggest peeve with Tuesdays on YouTube is the amount of top team videos we see. I think they are super boring. People going, this team's going to function well. However, sims are one thing, practice is something else. I saw Sophtoph, a highly talented battler, and play Pokemon Caster, recommend a team that is eligible all in its shadow form. So today we're going to test out, is this a top team in the Open Ultra League? Without any further ado, let's get into the battles. And in game 1, I lead Shadow Grumpig into Shadow Drapion. When I first saw this team recommendation, I thought Drapion's going to be a headache, Gliscopod going to be a nightmare, and both are going to be super common. When I was brainstorming in my head, I also thought a Mud Slap from the back is pretty much going to be GG's, and even the Common Gator could prove to be somewhat of an issue for my team. My Blastoise is going to be fully walled, as we're opting for Ice Beam on the save switch over Skull Bash. The first team today are very problematic. Not only they got Drapion, they've got a Gliscopod too. Had the energy for the Skull Bash, but my opponent not falling for any of that shenanigans. Instantly no shielded, and then for a very nice timing, firing off the X's and removing Blastoise from the field of play. I'm just going to send out Grumpig, look to absorb the energy and get the Dynamic Punch ready. X's is going to hit for neutral and a lot of neutral damage at that, but we should be able to get that full farm down. We do exactly that. The opponent banked the crunch, were able to catch back onto Galarian Weezing, but things not looking too promising. Both me and my opponent still have 2 shields in play, and this Drapion is continuing to stay in. I highly doubt they're running Sludge Bomb, but I've got 2 shields. They're a bit early to go for the reverse 2 shield flex in battle number 1. The opponent fire off the crunch. We return fire with the Sludge. Sludge goes unshielded. They're now in Brutal Swing range. We see Drapion still on the screen. Fire off the Brutal Swing, forcing the opponent's final Protect Shield. I'm just going to shield. Look for that Fairy Wind farm down. The opponent actually do have Sludge Bomb. Holy cow, was not expecting that. We then bank the Sludge, able to snipe with Grumpig. Out comes Cacturn. Cacturn not going to appreciate a Dynamic Punch. Dynamic Punch goes unshielded. The opponent recognises we had the Sludge banked, and we take that game. Heading into the next battle, we see Shadow and Shadow Crime with Machamp in the lead. The opponent save switches into Berserker. I'm going to fire off the Dynamic Punch, looking to force myself an early shield advantage and then send out Big Man Blastoise. Berserker does learn Trailblaze, but it doesn't get the same type of attack bonus, and I'm never shielding the first move. They reveal Foul Play, so now I'm thinking, would Foul Play Trailblaze make sense? It's got to be close combat, right? With that in mind, I invested Protect Shield, fearful of the big close combat. Unfortunately, I get baited with one further Foul Play. And Jamiefin, you absolute scrub. That was such a poor shield investment. I am going to throw this next Hydro Cannon on alignment, denying the opponent the opportunity to throw 4 Shadow Claws and the next charge move. We're able to force the opponent all shields down. And at this point, they're going to have to throw something that isn't Foul Play to pick up the knockout. The opponent does exactly that. Close combat removes Blastoise from the field of play. As they're debuffed, we can probably Fairy Wind farm them all the way down. The opponent sends out Registeel. We bank a bucketload of energy and Grumpig re-enters the arena. Zap Cannon unfortunately simply will not cut it, and the opponent's going to have a near impossible task of trying to lock on farm us down. Grumpig fires off the Dynamic Punch. Dynamic Punch is a very solid chunk, and Trainer you're going to have to throw. My opponent throws at perfect timing, one turn before the next dynamic punch is reached. I'll be honest, my starting elo was like 2500. I know people are already hitting legends, so I expected this to be a pretty modest elo, but we played a whole host of tough battlers today. Weezing with that shield to hide behind, going to be able to fire off back-to-back brutal swings, removing the minty green tin can from the field of play. Back out comes Machamp. Of course, Stone Edge would be the move to respect. The opponent actually revealed they're on rock slides. They've got no way of one-shotting us whatsoever. The opponent then go for the wham bam combo play, but both foul play and close combat will be resisted and not going to do much of anything. Galarian Weezing gets that full Fairy Wind farm down, leaving with the sludge. The pop-up in the corner tells you the opponent has conceded the match, and we're going to move to 2-0. GG's that opponent. Heading into the next battle, we see Grumpig into Poliwrath. Grumpig, of course, has been hugely buffed this season. Dynamic Punch is now cheaper and it will access to psywave. Week 2 of the season, well actually day 8 of the season, when Ultra League first came out, I did use Grumpig and I was so underwhelmed by it in Ultra League. One of the things that interested me about this team was the opportunity to give it another try out and see, was it just user error or is this Pokemon actually garbage? To be honest, when it sees a fighter, it's great. You can see Poliwrath actually able to get us pretty low. The opponent sends out Mandibuzz, we pivot into Big Boy Blastoise. The opponent clearly not having a great day of battling and they are going to resign the match. Heading into the next battle, we see Grumpig into Florges. This is a type neutral matchup. Everything we throw, going to hit them for neutral, and everything they throw, going to hit us for neutral. One of the things I didn't like about Grumpig, despite fighting Ghost coverage being currently unresisted in Pokemon Go, Ultra League Pokemon are super bulky and these charge moves just don't quite hit hard enough. We are able to force ourselves an early shield advantage, and I do believe a boosted Trailblaze is probably survivable, and it is. The opponent then send out Drapion. I'm going to chuck the Dynamic Punch and make the pivot into Big Man Blastoise. Hopefully after landing that Dynamic Punch, one Hydro Cannon will be enough to get the job done. Even the Shadow version of Blastoise doesn't hit particularly hard. These Hydro Cannons are kind of crazy. We all know that Hydro Cannon is a very busted move, but Blastoise is very defense weighted. And it's kind of hard to get used to just how little they do. With that in mind, I shield at the next crunch, heavily over farm, roll at them into a range where a Hydro Cannon will be lethal. The opponent then sends out Jellicent. Blastoise fully walled here. I'm going to fire off a Hydro Cannon rather than concede a massive farm down to make the pivot into Galarian Weezing. The opponent doesn't even farm up to the Shadow Ball. That's probably intentional, to be honest. They probably want me to no shield, and I do exactly that. They then pivot back out into Florges. I farm up, throw the sludge on the CMP tie. The opponent invests that Protect Shield. Trailblaze won't do much of anything. However, I don't want to put myself in a range where the opponent can potentially Hex farm me down. So I'm going to shield at the Trailblaze, over farm once again, maximise energy, throwing the sludge on the charge attack priority. Down goes Florges, one Fairy Wind and the Brutal Swing. Landing this Brutal Swing is huge for me. It's going to put him in a range where Blastoise can just roll out and Hydro Cannon and get the dub. The opponent over farm as much as they physically can. Surf will be removing me from the field of play. Back out comes Blastoise. We're already at the Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon probably won't be lethal, but we should be able to roll out farm down afterwards. Blastoise gets that roll out farm down, and we take that game. Heading into the next battle, we see Galarian Weezing in the lead position. This is kind of a scuffed matchup. My Psywaves hit them for super effective, but if they're running Brutal Swing, which quite a lot are, that will hit me for super effective, and they pace at only 8 turns to it. The opponent sends out Cradily. Cradily greeted with the Ice Beam, and Ice Beam forced the first Protect Shield of the game. Big Man Blastoise, an absolute tank in the Ultra League. Grass Knot probably wouldn't get the job done, and they actually go for a Rock Tomb bait anyway, so more fall on them. We're able to reach the next Ice Beam. Ice Beam rocks them below half health, and it's CMP. The opponent fire off the Rock Tomb. Rather than concede a farm down, we make the pivot into Grumpig, baiting back out Galarian Weezing. Galarian Weezing greeted with the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball rocks them deep into the red. We're going to tank the first Brutal Swing. If they make Brutal Swing number 2, I would consider shielding. The opponent actually fire off the Sludge. Either way, we're going to go for that one shield. Full Psywave farm down, and let's see what that third is. I highly doubt Cradily re-enters the arena as they're just going to get outpaced. To my surprise, Cradily does re-enter the arena, so we're going to take the initiative and look to remove them from the field of play. We fire off the Dynamic Punch. Dynamic Punch forces the final Protect Shield. Clearly they're weak to Grumpig in the back, but I'm quite low, and I'm about to get debuffed, so I don't want to shield. In Weezing, I believe. Out comes Lapras, and this game suddenly gets very, very dicey. I attempt to catch the Sparkling Aura unsuccessfully. Oh boy. Buckle up, this one is going to get close. Sparkling Aura rocks me below half health. We fire off the first Sludge. The next Sludge won't quite be lethal, but will put them low. There's numerous things going through my head at this point. I'm thinking double Brutal Swing is probably the safest play. I need to be mindful that Cradily is still around, and potentially, if they catch, I'm going to lose on the spot. The catch attempt comes, we hold our energy, over farm, farming up to a Brutal Swing plus Sludge combination. As long as one psywave doesn't knock us out, which it does not, we're going to be able to take that game. Galarian Weezing on invisible HP coming in clutch. GG's, and thanks for playing. Heading into the next battle, we see another Florges in the lead. The last opponent went Trailblazer the first time, and I think that's actually the correct play, as one Moonblast won't be lethal, so they're going to have to throw 2 moves anyway. So if you're going to throw a Trailblazer Moonblast combination, you may as well throw the Trailblazer the first time, boost up your attack, and then go for that Trailblaze after. I considered catching the Trailblaze onto my G-Weezy, where it wouldn't do much of anything. However, the reason I did not, if you're going to lead a Fairy, you've clearly got some kind of poison type counter in the back, so instead, we soft lose the opening, come in with G-Weezy, getting that farm down and not switch locking ourselves. The opponent sends out Golurk. Mud Slap on the back is going to be a problem for me. And there's Gator too. Can we win this game? The opponent does throw an alignment. That certainly helps as we do sneak a free rollout. The opponent fire off the Hydro Cannon. We go for good timing, using a 3-turn move into a 2-turn move. It's super simple. Just throw an odd number. So ideally 1, 3 or 5. If my opponent's smart, they're going to save 2 shields for Golurk. So what I need to do, 1 roller and the Hydro Cannon. I should hit a nice hit. I do go for an undercharge, but clearly that is far too many bubbles here. A very, very poor play. Back out comes Golurk. As I didn't undercharge enough, we're not going to reach double Hydro Cannon. And at that point, I realise a backup Wincon is going to be the fast move beatdown. I pivot into Galarian Weezing. These Fairy Winds are hitting for neutral, and it's the only fast move pressure I've got into them. So if I would have thrown the double Hydro, you could see there, I would have been able to reach the Brutal Swing. Now we need a rollout to knock out to get a tie. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. I think if I would have played that a bit cleaner, perhaps the outcome would have been different, but GG's to that opponent. In the next battle again, we see Galarian Weezing in the lead position. Even the non-shadow, if they're on Brutal Swing, it almost 2 shots. To be honest, even neutral Sludge, as Sludge is now a pretty good move, is able to 2-shot as well. We're able to force ourselves an early shield advantage, and I make the pivot into Big Man Blastoise. My Blastoise save switch is answered by Jellicent. I think Jellicent is such a slept on pick in this meta. Not that I particularly like Jellicent, but if you want to win a lot, I'd recommend using it. It's just so good into opposing water types not named for Alligator. Although to be fair to Jellicent, it's decent into Gliscopod and even Gator. Just the Shadow Gator proves to be somewhat of an issue, as them Shadow Claws are really add up quick. Shadow Claw. The Shadow variant getting Shadow bonus on his Shadow Claws I think makes more sense. Despite me not being able to talk, let's return to commentary. You can see the bulk on Big Man Blastoise, able to keep switch advantage. However, Galarian Weezing just gets even more farm. I'm going to send up my own G-Weezy. G-Weezy going to tank the first Sludge, and I need to start shielding, so I'm going to shield up Sludge number 2. I actually know this opponent. Shout out Paulo Cycling. I feel like we play like 2 or 3 times every single season. He banks his energy, sends out Lapras. Dynamic Punch doesn't one-shot. But a Sludge should put it in a range where the Psywave and Dynamic Punch combination should get the KO. I send out Grumpig, gonna shield at the Sparkling Aura. I'm then gonna overfarm, fire off the Dynamic Punch. I think this move always goes shielded. Can we Psywave him into a range where a Sludge is lethal? That isn't quite Sludge range, and we do need to be mindful that Galarian Weezing also has residual energy as well. The opponent goes for the combo play. Am I in Sludge range? Unfortunately I am, and we are going to take back-to-back losses. GG's. Heading into the next battle, we play arguably, in my humble opinion, one of the best battlers in the world. It is my friend No Bonfire Head. When you've just lost back-to-back battles, you don't want to see No Bonfire Head. And what the heck is he running? Enamorous? Bro, give me a break. Fly does ridiculous damage. Thankfully, Shadow Ball able to pick up the 1-hit KO. I pivot into Big Man Blastoise and out comes Malamar. We actually featured No Bonfire Head's Legend run last season in Ultra League, where he navigated a very spicy team of Shadow of Abomasnow, Primeape and Malamar to an 18-2 run and able to hit number 2 in the world, which was frankly absurd. If he goes for a foul play here, I'll survive and get off the Hydro Cannon, but of course he knows that. He full sends the superpower, guaranteeing the shield or the knockout. I send out Galarian Weezing, and thankfully I've got a heavy team comp advantage into his team. Of course, Rage Fist comes with a 100% chance to vamp up the user's attacks. You never want to shield the first move. I'm going straight Sludge here. He knows I don't bait, but I'm not going to change my playstyle just because I'm playing a friend. I full send the Sludge. Sludge does force the first Protect Shield. We could survive this, but I don't want to die to the Psywaves as Malamar is still fairly healthy. I try to make a catch. He's not falling for any of my shenanigans, but his Primeape has almost run out of HP. Rage Fist picks up the knockout. I send back out Galarian Weezing. Of course, I'm going to shield up this boosted Rage Fist. I've now got double Sludge Bank, so when Malamar does return, one Sludge will be forcing his final Protect Shield, and the second will be all she wrote. To be honest, Team Comp probably got me over the line as opposed to skill. No Bomblehead is also the creator of my favourite Great League team, which is Chestnut, Typhlosion, Drapion, heading into the next battle. You see Shiny Lapras in the lead position. This is a pretty good matchup for me, as the Psywaves are resisted, our Psywaves are hitting for neutral, and we reach the Dynamic Punch at exactly the same speed as they reach the Sparkling Aura. Of course, Grumpig gonna win CMP, as Lapras is insanely defense weighted. As my first one went unshielded, I don't really want to chuck a Dynamic Punch at Lapras in the red health range. I'm just going to catch the next charge move onto Big Man Blastoise, banking my Dynamic Punch for later. My Blastoise save switch is answered by Galarian Weezing. As it's Shadow and Shadow Crime, Hydro Cannon does a very solid chunk. Unless my opponent's on Play Rough, Sludge will be survivable. The opponent fire off the Sludge, Big Man Blastoise shrugs off the damage, and the opponent is going to be forced to throw further energy. Brutal Swing picks up the knockout. I could send out Grumpig, go for the one shield and farm down, but instead I'm going to send out Weezing and look to start getting ahead on energy. Sludge, Shadow and Shadow Crime does a very solid chunk, and back out comes Lapras. I don't want to switch lock myself, so I'm going to over farm, fire off the Brutal Swing, removing them from the field of play. I now have the opportunity to switch or just stay in, depending what they have. Back out comes Galarian Weezing, and I very much regret not shielding that earlier Sludge. Brutal Swing does go unshielded, and out comes Galarian Moltres. We've made it, 16.5 minutes into today's video, and of course, you're not watching a jamiefin video unless I reverse 2 shield flex. Shout out Rollin' the Heat, another person with features on the channel who is going to get that reverse 2 shield flex. GG's buddy. Poor old Galarian Weezing is going to get resisted, Sucker Punch farm down, and we're going to move into the next battle. Yet another Galarian Weezing in the lead. This lead is so common right now. Let's see if this opponent has Brutal Swing, or if they're going to sludge me. And that'll pretty much be the deciding point of how I play this matchup. We're going to tank the Brutal Swing, fire off the Shadow Ball, and look to catch Brutal Swing number 2 onto Blastoise. The catch attempt isn't the cleanest, but they do dump their energy. The opponent just fires off the Brutal Swing, which is very nice for me, and out comes the Panda Bear. So Poison type in the lead, with a Dark type in the back. This is almost certainly going to be a Poison double Dark strategy, and if that's the case, I think we're home and dry. My opponent's lost almost all of their own Galarian Weezing, and if this is a double Dark team, they're going to struggle to get rid of my full health Galarian Weezing. The opponent firing off Night Slash after Night Slash, I send out Galarian Weezing, and this is just farm time. Close Combat double resisted, Night Slash also resisted. They fire off the Close Combat, it does absolutely nothing, and out comes Malamar. Psywaves are going to chunk, as one turn moves when super effective do really add up, but their charge moves are resisted. But with that being said, I have got 2 shields, and we're going to have to start shielding up resisted moves. I'm really surprised to see the opponent not shield up the next Sludge, but that's fine. I think that's the final nail in this opponent's coffin. We go for the one shield, full Fairy Wind farm, and the opponent sends out Galarian Weezing. We snipe with Grumpig, back out comes the Panda Bear. We're able to outpace to the Dynamic Punch. Dynamic Punch will be forcing the opponent's final protection, and they're never ever Karate Chop farming down. The opponent overfarms as much as they physically can. Their only win con at this point is boosting, and a boosted move are somehow knocking out Galarian Weezing. As they didn't get the boost there, I'm not even going to shield this next move either. The opponent fire off the Close Combat, Galarian Weezing, hold strong, and we take that game. Heading into the next battle, we see the Kentucky Fried Chicken, a Bird of Death. We're going to farm up and try our luck catching a Flame Charge. Some Talonflame still are on Flame Charge, a lot are on the full flying moveset of Fly and Brave Bird respectively. My Blastoise save switch is answered by Florges. I can't believe how common this thing is now. I guess it's pretty good. All it did need was a cheaper charge move that isn't fairy. Now they've got access to Trailblaze and Moonblast. I think it's a pretty solid Pokemon. I can't wait to see one in its Shadow form released. Hopefully this season, but I highly doubt it. You can see a boosted Moonblast did far more than I was expecting. I'm going to overfarm, fire off the Sludge from this range. A Sludge will be moving them from the field of play. If Talonflame returns, we can to and fro the next Sludge. The opponent actually sends out Lapras. So as I said previously, Dynamic Punch isn't going to one-shot, but a Sludge should put them in a range where Dynamic Punch will be lethal. We pivot out into Grumpig. I am going to shield this move up. We just need to be mindful of the opponent trying to catch Dynamic Punch onto Talonflame. Talonflame re-enters the arena. We're going to full send the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball number 1 forces the first Protect Shield. Grumpig able to outpace to the second Shadow Ball, and the opponent's got a decision to make. Shadow Ball goes unshielded, and once again, quite underwhelming damage if I'm being brutally honest, but this makes my life easy. We can just shield, psywave farm down, a win con from this point is pretty straightforward. Lapras dump this energy to outpace to the dynamic punch, force the opponent to throw and sludge them to the face. Jamie, don't do it, don't do it. We farm up, make the catch, potentially finding our lose con. If the opponent undercharged, this could be GG's. However, they don't go for that play. We're able to outpace to the next dynamic punch. Was it necessary? Completely not. But ask yourself, are you not entertained? GG's and thanks for playing. Heading into the next battle, we see big man Blastoise in the lead. The opponent rocking some very cool sunglasses. I attempt to catch a Hydro Cannon onto my own Blastoise unsuccessfully, and we're now going to get Skull Bash to the face. Ouch. As I'm not running Skull Bash, I really hope the opponent pivots out because this is a miserable matchup for me. Thankfully, the opponent sends out Virizion. We land the Ice Beam. I'm just going to settle for the Hydro Cannon here. It's actually IV dependent if you win CMP. Virizion should win, but my Blastoise has pretty scuffed IVs. But I'm pretty glad to get any more chip damage I physically can. This just puts it in a range where I can fair and win farm down with Weezing and get a very nice running start. My opponent farmed up to double charge moves. The opponent throws instantly, so I know this cannot be a Stone Edge. They don't have the energy. Galarian Weezing gets a very nice fair and win farm down. The opponent send out their own Galarian Weezing. I'm going to fire off the Sludge. Sludge forces the protection. I'm going to farm up, try and make a Sludge catch onto Grumpig. However, the catch attempt is unsuccessful and I get brutal swung to the face. The opponent then go for the wham, bam, combo play, sending out Blastoise. I'm going to shoot the Hydro Cannon and start unleashing Dynamic Punches. Dynamic Punch is the most energy efficient move. If you're only going to reach one, a Shadow Ball does do slightly more. I'm able to reach the next Dynamic Punch on the charge attack priority. Dynamic Punch, once again, doesn't quite do enough damage. I'm going to save my final shield for Weezing and look to clean up. Hydro Cannon is undercharged. Rather than concede a farm down, we pivot out into Galarian Weezing. I go for 4 Fairy Winds and the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing removes them from the field of play. Back out comes G-Weezy. I need to land 2 moves. My Weezing has scuffed IV, so I thought even with the opponent bait, it's going to be CMP to the next Sludge, and I'm pretty confident I'll win. The IVs in this thing are like 14, 12, 15. We look to reach the next Sludge, and I was swearing very heavily here, thinking, are you fucking kidding me? Oh man, unfortunately the opponent's masturbating killed a poor defenseless cat, and my hopes and dreams in that battle. GG's to that opponent. Heading into the next battle, we are looking for some redemption, and we find ourselves a fantastic lead. I don't know why, it seems like a lot of Lapras opt to stay in. So Grumpig certainly has some merit. The team seem to be ABA weak to it. We fire off the Dynamic Punch. As I said previously, we pace at the same speed and have the higher attack, meaning we're able to reach Dynamic Punch number 2, rocking them into the red health range. This is more or less Spark and Aura range. Again, we're not going to pivot out. I'm just going to let the opponent get a small farm down, and in return, send out Big Man Blastoise looking for my own farm down. The opponent sends out Virizion, we farm up, make the catch onto Galarian Weezing, banking our energy in the process. The opponent threw a Sacred Sword, so that to me suggests they don't have Leaf Blade, of course. If they had Leaf Blade, there's no point in throwing Sacred Sword, as they're both 35 energy. With that in mind, if the opponent farm up to the Stone Edge, which they do, I may as well shield and keep Galarian Weezing at almost full health. Right on cue, there was the Stone Edge. Galarian Weezing gets the farm down, leaving with residual energy good to go. Back out comes Lapras. We overfarm, fire off the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing forces my opponent's final Protect Shield. We pivot into Big Man Blastoise, baiting out Clefable. Upper Protect Shield. This should be pretty straightforward from here. 2 Hydro Cannons, unfortunately, won't get the job done, despite me being Shadow. Blastoise, where is your attack stat? Very disappointing, mate. However, there is a trade-off. You might not hit hard, but the thing can certainly tank a hit. Even a Moonblast doesn't get the job done. We're going to fire off the Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon number 3 removes Clefable from the field of play. And it's time to give the opponent the wham, bam, combo play, the Big Mac and the fries. And Brutal Swing is going to be all she wrote. GG's that opponent. Heading into the next battle. Yet another Galarian Weezing. Holy moly, this thing is so common today. Let's see if it's a Brutal Swing or Sludge variant. The opponent fire off the Brutal Swing. We're going to withstand the damage, overfarm, fire off the Shadow Ball. And we're going to play it exactly the same as we played all the other ones. Try and catch the next Brutal Swing onto Big Man Blastoise. And we're able to do exactly that. A lot of non-Shadow Galarian Weezing do opt for Overheat as a second move, as the non-Shadow of Brutal Swing just doesn't really output enough damage. You can see Blastoise laughed at that pitiful damage. However, out comes Jellicent. In this matchup, we are fully walled, but Blastoise, very bulky, very spammy, does do something. You can see we've already managed to get our opponent below half health. In this situation, I think there's 0 point in shielding this move up. as it's not like the next Hydro Cannon would even knock him out. Instead, we're going to take our shield advantage and let Galarian Weezing come in and look to load up on energy. We correctly shield up the Shadow Ball. I'm just going to throw one Fairy Wind and look to knock this Jellicent out before the opponent has any bright ideas of trying to save it for later. Brutal Swing picks up the knockout and out comes King Cradilly. I do pivot out into Grumpig, but I think I should have definitely thrown a charge move first, looking to do damage or force a shield. The opponent fire off the Rock Tomb, then they're able to snipe with Galarian Weezing, but Galarian Weezing is so low. This is only a Brutal Swing, as I have been keeping track on energy. This game is going to get very dicey. Back out comes Cradilly, one Fairy Wind and the Sludge. The opponent with 2 shields, still reluctant to shield. The next Sludge would pretty much knock him out. I don't often bait, but what the heck is the opponent going to do? They have to shield this move, and they do exactly that. You might wonder why I go on and on about good fast move time, and I remember this battle because the opponent there threw an alignment, giving me a free Fairy Wind. Not only that, spoiler alert, we've almost got no HP, so the win con for the opponent would be Bullet Seed farming down. We're going to land this next Sludge. You can see again the opponent opt to throw energy, so we get a free Fairy Wind there. The next Bullet Seed potentially knocks me out, but the Fairy Wind is going to register first, and we're able to take that game. That is why you should throw out good timing, heading into the next battle. We found ourselves a problem, and its name is Drapion. I attempt to catch a crunch onto Blastoise unsuccessfully. The opponent overfarms, stay in, fire off a crunch before lightly pivoting out. Looks like the opponent just going to stay in, fire off one further crunch. As they didn't get the defense drop, this move won't be lethal. I go for one rollout and the Hydro Cannon, and the opponent pivots and catches it onto Gliscopod. This one not going too well. Here I am going to throw an alignment. I think if I look to throw at good timing, I get Shadow Claw farm down before getting the move off. That turns out to be the correct decision, as the next Shadow Claw does indeed knock me out. Back out comes Grumpig. The opponent fire off the X-Scissor. X-Scissor does far too much, to be honest. We're going to fire off the Dynamic Punch, go for an undercharge, get a 1 Fairy Wind running start, but this Drapion has residual energy and is going to be a problem for me. Out comes Blastoise. Galarian Weezing needs to put the team on its back. This is a pretty neutral matchup. The opponent has 2 shields and almost a full health Drapion with residual energy. My opponent's farmed up a lot of energy. This could potentially be a Skull Bash, and it is that. It's great we shielded, but it's not fantastic that the bulky Blastoise now has a +1 defense. Again, we're going to look to keep throwing at good timing, 4 Fairy Winds and the next Sludge, but this next Sludge doesn't even knock him out. My opponent's been very disciplined to this point, so we're going to anticipate him going for one rollout and the charge move. We're able to sack Grumpig, but does that give us a win con. Unfortunately, unable to Fairy Wind farm down before the next Hydro Cannon's reached. This buffed up Blastoise is going to be a headache. Back out comes Drapion. We're going to need to reach 3 moves. 2 Sludges with a Fairy Wind, pretty much knockout. However, the opponent just farms up to double Aqua Tail. This isn't Aqua Tail range. However, the opponent's got one more, and that is going to be all she wrote. GG's that opponent. Very nicely played. Both Drapion and Gliscopod somewhat of an issue for the team, and unfortunately they seem to come paired together. In the next battle, we find ourselves yet another Gliscopod. I'm going to farm up, look to make the catch onto Blastoise. However, the opponent's likely going to throw an X-Scissor, which is the move they wanted to throw at Blastoise anyway. Then out comes Gator. Of course, I'm not running Skull Bash. My opponent doesn't know my moveset, so you've always got to look to fake it till you make it. We farm up, bluffing a Skull Bash, trying to gain any advantage we can here in the mid-game matchup. We do exactly that, forcing the opponent's first Protect Shield. We're then going to fire off one roller and the Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon does some decent chip damage, but the opponent's going to get a massive Shadow Claw farm down. Grumpig can tank any one move. It's actually reasonably bulky, even in its shadow form, to be honest. The opponent then pivots back out into Gliscopod. I'm going to fire off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball goes unshielded. This enables me to send out Galarian Weezing, go for the 1 shield, a full Fairy Wind farm down, and then Weezing's going to have a very nice energy lead for whatever's in the back, or potentially that Gator that could, of course, return. Feraligatr is very close to the next Hydro Cannon, so I can't afford to overfarm too much. I don't want to go down my final Protect Shield, but the opponent invests their final Protect Shield, revealing they're likely weak to me in the back. We're going to shield up the Hydro Cannon. The opponent's switch timer will be popping up. I pause, ensuring this thing's still on my screen, and look to knock him out. Brutal Swing does exactly that. It's Guzzlord in the back, and despite us seeing a dreadful lead, the opponent recognises there's nothing they can do, and they are going to concede the match. GG's that opponent. Heading into the next battle, we found ourselves an awful lead. Our psywaves are double resisted. Dynamic Punch would hit for super effective. We're going to bank the Dynamic Punch to the road and send out Big Man Blastoise. Of course, Grumpig is awful into this thing in the 2 shield scenario, but if we can force some shields off the opponent somewhere, potentially we open up the door to Dynamic Punch them at a later point. The The opponent fire off the crunch, then attempt to catch an Ice Beam. The catch attempt unsuccessful. But again, out comes Gliscopod. This thing is the bane of my life today, causing me all sorts of problems. Blastoise able to fire off back-to-back Hydro Cannons, getting them below half health. I could have fired off the Dynamic Punch instantly, but I think I always need a little bit of residual energy, so I'm willing to tank a charge move. I'm then going to overfarm close to the double Dynamic Punch and look to remove them from the field of play. We then pivot into Galarian Weezing. Despite switch timers being misaligned, we threw so many charge moves in that mid-game matchup. The opponent's able to pivot out into Skeledirge. This is with being the shadow is really helpful. As you can see, 2 Brutal Swings that certainly knock this thing out. This is almost certainly a Torch Song. You'd often hear people say you don't want to shield the first one. A subsequent ones after that will do more. But if I didn't shield that, I'd probably get Incinerated farm down. You can see Discipline Timing, 2 Fairy Winds and the Brutal Swing. That's 4 turns into 5, therefore only giving the opponent 1 free turn. I'm not entirely sure why the opponent didn't shield that. Very, very strange. Galarian Weezing, double resisting these Dragon Tails. The opponent shielded the first sludge. We're able to reach sludge number 2. And just like that, we're going to take that game. GG's that opponent. And that is just about going to wrap things up for today's showcase. Huge shout out to both Sophtoph for the team and Inadequence for posting the team graphic on Twitter, which is where I saw the team. I'll be honest, I'm still not a huge fan of Grumpig. I think both Big Man Blastoise and Galarian Weezing are very good. Despite Grumpig having the same ability as stuff like Primate and Annihilate, that ghost fighting coverage that is currently unresisted, it doesn't get a stab on either of them moves and I find it somewhat underwhelming. So if you're enjoying the content, smash that like button if you're new, consider subscribing if you like your battles featured on my channel. A link to our battle submission form is down below, and as always a huge thanks to everyone for watching and I'll see you all in the next one.